Bruce Pearl might be without a veteran guard for quite some time for the 2021-22 season. How long and the implications of the injury are the biggest questions from this news. Let's discuss the impact on the outlook of our upcoming season for men's basketball. My name is Kyle, the editor for the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. Our content here and on our podcast network may tend to be Auburn sports heavy, but if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. If you're new to this channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell so you never miss any content from us. Thank you to members of the Booster Club like John Stokes, who help produce videos like this. Rumors started swirling late, we'll say the first week of September, about a certain Auburn basketball player potentially having an injury. Now, the nature of how that happened and whether it or not is true is not really important to this story, and we're not really going to be discussing it because it really doesn't solve anything at this point to even kind of delve into those things. But essentially, the rumors were that Allen Flanigan had an injury that was going to result in him having some issues in terms of playing time to start off the season. Well, we finally got confirmation from Auburn basketball that he did sustain a non-basketball injury that required a procedure that was successful Friday the 3rd on his right Achilles tendon. Because of this trauma and the successful procedure, he will be expected to miss 12 to 14 weeks. Allen Flanigan was quoted as saying, "It's an unfortunate situation, but I trust that God has a plan. I'm going to work hard to get back stronger and better than ever, and we have full faith that he will." So again, not really important how it happened. It's done. It's over with. Now, what are the big questions, the big implications of how this affects not only Bruce Pearl and his team, but our outlook on the rest of the season? And it will play a huge factor on that. There are two ways to look at this: the schedule and then the roster breakdown. Now, let's start off with the schedule before we get into anything else. 12 to 14 weeks. That's what we have to operate with. 12 weeks from the date of the successful procedure, not surgery, but procedure is what it was labeled as, would be November 26th. Now, if you're looking along with me on the schedule, you will see that basically takes him through 3/4 of the non-conference schedule. That is significant, not just in terms of him being a provider and a successful contributor to this team during those important games, but in terms of getting him ready for the whole season. So let's kind of look at what he's going to be missing out on. On the 9th, November 9th, Morehead State. On the 12th, Louisiana Monroe. The 19th at South Florida. And the 24th, which is the big one that he is definitely going to be missing, would be a matchup or matchups in the Battle for Atlantis tournament that Auburn will be taking a part of. They'll start off with a game against UConn, which is expected to be a good one. They will then take on the winner of either Loyola, well, we say the winner, but whoever they get matched up with based on the result of their competition. Loyola Chicago and Michigan State is one of their opponents that they'll take on. And then eventually they would take on one of the four based on how they do and the rest of the teams do on their side of the bracket: Arizona State, Baylor, VCU, and Syracuse. It is a loaded field, one that is going to be unfortunate that we don't have Allen to be a factor on this team with. So in terms of looking at this, you can expect Allen to not be a part of any of these games, especially that tournament. Now, things sometimes go really well, and you might see him get better a lot sooner. However, in his junior year, in a time where he is getting ready to go to the draft more than likely and stay there at this time, I would suspect that they're going to do everything in their power to set him up for success in the future and not rush him back into this. So I would not expect to see him back for any of these games, including the Battle for Atlantis tournament. Before we go any further, I want to remind you of a couple of ways that you can help support the content that we do here on this channel. Check out some of the links in the description. Two things that I want to point out to you are becoming a channel supporter. You can do that by going to the description, looking up above in the video right now, or even just hitting that join button. $1 a month is all it takes to help support the content that we produce here. You can take that a step further. It starts at $1 a month as well. The Booster Club, where you get access to a few more different things, a little bit more perks for your buck, and there are different tiers that you can check out there as well for things that you might be interested in. Just check out the links in the description, and we appreciate you being here and being a supporter, whether that just be through viewing or if you do become part of one of those programs. Let's look at the next part of that range, that 12 to 14 weeks. So you've got a group of 3 games there, or really 2 games, but we're going to probably going to assume one of those is going to be included in this. That 14-week range would result in December the 10th being the point where he could potentially return. You have a game at Auburn against UCF, which should be interesting, even though Gus Malzahn will not be a part of that. You've got December the 4th with Yale at Auburn. And then on the 11th, which is one day after that window, you've got a matchup in Atlanta on a neutral site game for Hoopsgiving, I believe is the event, with Nebraska. Now, this is probably a little bit of a step out on my part. I don't expect him to be back for any of these, and for the reasons I've already addressed. I think they're going to go super precautious with this. And the other thing, too, you got to think about, we'll talk about in terms of roster breakdown in just a second, you got to really think about how the makeup of the team could be negatively affected in an important part in the schedule. If they've gotten used to playing a certain way for this point in the schedule, it might not be a good idea to insert Allen into such a crucial point in the schedule. However, December the 14th is the start of the last 3 non-conference games outside of the SEC Big 12 Challenge for Auburn, and that begins with North Alabama at home. I think this is the perfect time to insert Allen Flanigan because it gives him the full range of recovery that's recommended, plus some. It gets a home environment, which should be, and we say this with quotation marks, we've seen it happen before, should be an easy win for Auburn. The next game, the 18th, you go to St. Louis in Missouri. It's a nice travel to see how that he's going to respond to that type of thing and that type of environment. It's going to be a pretty good basketball environment. And then the 22nd, Murray State, which rounds out the non-conference slate of competition, again, outside of the SEC Big 12 competition, which comes later on in the season. So I think those 3 games right there give him a good opportunity to see how he's feeling, how that leg is health-wise, and how his mentality and him getting used to being a contributor back on this team after they've spent so much time without him. Lastly, I want to look at the position effects and really just the overall roster things that are going to be affected by this. Position-wise, we were already very short at guard for a variety of reasons. It's been a pretty crazy offseason for guards. But now this really forces a situation where Wendell Green and Zep Jasper are already going to be kind of the 1 and 2 for point guard, mainly with Wendell most likely being the main point guard. You might see Zep having to contribute a little bit more at the 2 position. KD Johnson just moved way up the chart if he wasn't already in terms of being a big-time contributor in his first season at Auburn after transferring from Georgia. But you've also got to look at what this might have been for players like Trey Alexander, who decided to leave earlier this offseason, Desi Stills, if things had worked out and they would actually transfer from Arkansas to Auburn, they would have seen significant play time. So, unfortunately, that's not going to be able to alleviate some of our problems, but it's just interesting in hindsight to go back and look at that. So, short at guard already will force some of these guards to really contribute in some areas maybe where they weren't necessarily going to at a certain point. Speaking of which, other players contribute at guard that maybe were already hybrid players but will have to contribute more at technically guard. You'll be playing in more bigger guard sets. This means players like Chris Moore and Devin Cambridge, especially Cambridge, we've seen a lot more time out there on the floor. Not that they were going to be seeing much less time or even less time at all, but you're definitely going to see some bigger guard sets. For these guys, they're going to need to give a break to Wendell Green, Zep Jasper, KD Johnson until Allen Flanigan can get back in a health perspective, but also get back in a mentality set and where he can really be a contributor and part of this team. So in terms of the roster, makes things a little bit more difficult, maybe a little bit less flexibility for Coach Bruce Pearl and who he can insert where, but I don't think it's the absolute worst thing in the world that could have happened. Point guard, knock on wood right now, would have been the absolute worst thing that could have happened. But it's not something that I had wished on Coach Bruce Pearl and the rest of the team, but we'll see how they respond. What do you guys think? Just post the game that you think that he'll be back by down there in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this type of content, please help support it by smashing that like button. And if you want more content, be sure to hit the subscribe and notification bell so you never miss an upload or a live stream. There are also other ways to help support this type of content, such as that are listed in the description. Thank you for tuning into the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. War Eagle.